On 30th March, a married couple tragically lost their lives in a plane crash at Truckee Airport, California, while attempting an instrument approach in icing conditions, with weather below minimums. The NTSB already released a preliminary report shortly after the crash, and there's a lot for us to discuss. Let's dive in. The aircraft at the center of the tragic crash was a 2022 Daher TBM 700, owned by Avam Enterprises LLC. Its tail number, November 960 Lima Papa, identified this sleek, high-performance single-engine turboprop designed for both business and utility. With advanced avionics, including autopilot and GPS navigation systems, it catered to pilots of varying experience levels, offering a blend of sophistication and reliability. On board the flight were Lyron Petrushka and his wife Naomi, both accomplished pilots. The couple, based in the Truckee area, had recently acquired the TBM in November 2022 and quickly accumulated over 250 flight hours in it. Lon and Naomi were Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and tech investors, their success from selling a business in 1999 allowing them to enjoy the lifestyle that included flying. They had flown in and out of Truckee numerous times, becoming intimately familiar with the challenging terrain in the area. On March 27th, Lon and Naomi were returning home from a family visit in Denver. Sadly, they would not make it back. According to the NTSB preliminary report, the crash occurred at 6:37 p.m. local time, just as the sun was setting and the airport tower was closing for the day. The couple had been executing the RNAV GPS runway 20 instrument approach, which brings planes in at an angle to the 4,654-foot runway. The alternative, runway 29, is a longer 7,000-foot option, but the weather and visibility made runway 20 their best choice. Weather conditions were far from ideal. The visibility at the time was reported at 3/4 of a mile in light snow, with an overcast ceiling at 900 feet. The temperature and dew point both sat at 30 degrees Fahrenheit, creating no temperature-dew point spread, indicating an increased likelihood of moisture and icing. Though the approach minimums required 1 mile of visibility for a straight-in approach or 1¼ to 1½ miles for a circling approach, conditions fell short, with visibility under 0.34 statute miles according to airport footage. The accident occurred during the missed approach phase of the procedure, which required a climbing right turn to 12,000 feet, avoiding the treacherous surrounding terrain. A climb rate of 270 feet per nautical mile was essential to safely ascend to 7,700 feet, but this proved difficult in the challenging conditions. Soundings in the area indicated nimbostratus clouds producing light snow, with cloud tops around 17,700 feet, and the potential for light to moderate icing below that altitude. NTSB data showed that the TBM climbed to a cruising altitude of 30,000 feet after departing Denver. As it approached Truckee, the plane gradually descended, entering potential icing conditions at 17,700 feet. For 20 minutes, the aircraft continued through icing conditions before the crash occurred. Though equipped with anti-icing and de-icing systems, the aircraft's performance was tested as it descended toward the Truckee Airport in the adverse weather. At 6:37 p.m., the aircraft passed over the final approach fix at 6,475 feet, right at the instrument approach minimums. Just 20 seconds later, the aircraft crossed the missed approach point at 6,200 feet MSL and 100 knots. It hovered between 6,100 and 6,200 feet until it was alongside the runway numbers. This TBM model had an auto throttle to engage the missed approach mode of the autopilot. However, the autopilot was off. The plane then began a gentle 180-degree right turn, climbing to 6,750 feet at the turn's base. During this period, several autopilot adjustments were made, including activating altitude hold and lateral navigation mode, or LNAV. However, the crew failed to execute the proper climb procedure for the missed approach, and the autopilot was ultimately disengaged at 6:37:02 as the aircraft crossed over runway 11. Without the necessary altitude, the aircraft began to lose control. It momentarily climbed to 6,850 feet before starting a rapid descent, with the last NTSB returns showing a sharp drop in altitude and an increase in speed. At 6:37 p.m., the aircraft was just 200 feet above the ground, traveling at 170 knots when it crashed into the terrain northeast of the first impact point. The crash occurred after the airport's air traffic control tower had already closed. The runway lights, which the pilot may have attempted to activate via microphone clicks, were not operational at the time. So what can obviously be seen as the first factor to have contributed to the crash was the harsh weather condition. But there is something else that we need to talk about, which is automation confusion. The pilot's handling of the autopilot system and auto throttle during the missed approach was marked by several changes in settings that indicate uncertainty or mismanagement of the automated systems. Throughout the missed approach, the pilot made multiple selections involving altitude hold, lateral navigation, and autopilot on-off, creating a chaotic situation where the automation did not seem to follow a consistent plan. The pilot's actions suggest that there may have been confusion regarding the correct configuration of the autopilot during the missed approach phase. Instead of maintaining a steady climb to the prescribed missed approach altitude of 12,000 feet, various altitude selections were made, like 7,000 feet, 7,900 feet, 8,800 feet, and 9,300 feet, but none of which matched the required climb profile. This inconsistency in altitude selections suggests a lack of clarity in understanding how to manage the automation, particularly in a high-stress environment like a missed approach in poor weather. One key point of confusion likely stemmed from the auto throttle system, which is designed to automatically engage during the missed approach. The auto throttle would push the throttle up to provide the necessary power for the aircraft to climb. However, the autopilot was turned off during this phase, leading to a situation where the auto throttle may have been active, but the aircraft was otherwise in manual flight. This mismatch between the autopilot and auto throttle systems likely compounded the pilot's confusion, as the expectation may have been for the autopilot to assist in the climb. With the autopilot disengaged, the pilot had to manually fly the aircraft while potentially mismanaging the power settings, contributing to a loss of control. Additionally, the pilot had only 250 hours of experience in this particular TBM aircraft, a relatively low amount of time to become fully familiar with the complex automation systems on board. Modern aircraft like the TBM feature advanced systems that require significant training to master, especially in situations where multiple systems, like the autopilot and auto throttle, must work together seamlessly. In this case, the pilot's limited experience with the aircraft's automated systems combined with the challenging conditions likely contributed to confusion and difficulty in managing the missed approach. Another major factor in the accident was aeronautical decision-making, particularly the decision to proceed with the instrument approach in conditions that were below the required minimums. The pilot faced a complex set of circumstances: low visibility, snow, mountainous terrain, a closed air traffic control tower, and runway lighting that was not operational. These conditions made for a high-risk environment, and the decision to continue the approach rather than diverting to a safer location significantly contributed to the crash. The decision to continue the approach in such poor weather conditions may have stemmed from a combination of get-there-itis, a well-documented phenomenon where pilots feel compelled to complete a flight despite challenging conditions, and overconfidence in the aircraft's capabilities. Given that the pilot was familiar with Truckee Airport and had experience flying in and out of the area, there may have been a false sense of security in being able to complete the approach, despite the deteriorating weather. Additionally, the pilot's confidence in the aircraft's advanced de-icing and autopilot systems may have influenced the decision to push forward. The mountainous terrain surrounding Truckee adds another layer of complexity to the decision-making process. The approach involves navigating through a bowl surrounded by higher terrain, requiring precise altitude management and situational awareness. In poor visibility and under instrument flight rules, even minor deviations from the prescribed flight path can result in collision with terrain. The decision to attempt the approach in such conditions without the assistance of air traffic control and with a runway visual approach indicator system that was not operational left little margin for error. Rather than diverting to a location with better weather and less challenging terrain, the pilot chose to continue with the approach. In hindsight, diverting to a safer location, such as an airport with better weather or a longer runway, would have significantly reduced the risk to the flight. Proper aeronautical decision-making involves weighing the risks and benefits of each course of action, and in this case, the decision to proceed into hazardous conditions tipped the odds against a successful landing. So what can we learn from this? First, automation confusion can turn a pilot's day into a chaotic dance with buttons and switches, especially in bad weather. The pilot's autopilot and auto throttle settings were all over the place, like a DJ at a rave, leading to a lack of control. Second, good aeronautical decision-making is crucial. The pilot's choice to continue the approach in terrible weather, with low visibility and non-operational runway lights, was like trying to find a needle in a haystack blindfolded. Always weigh the risks and consider diverting to safer options. And that's the end of our episode today. Thank you for watching, and wish you all stay safe up there.